In a shadowy Atlanta parking lot, Officer Brett Hargrove snaps cuffs onto Lena Marshall, a black woman, his voice thick with scorn as he growls about resistance. Her wrists bleed, yet she's calm, almost too calm. Then she flashes a CIA badge, whispering her title. Hargrove's smirk fades, his hands quake, stumbling back in raw panic. This isn't just a stop gone sour, it's a spark that'll ignite chaos, scarring both their futures. What happens when power meets prejudice? Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe for more electrifying stories. Lena Marshall sat in her sleek black sedan, parked in the cracked asphalt lot of a shuttered convenience store on the edge of a quiet Atlanta suburb. The evening air hung heavy, thick with the scent of gasoline and pine from the woods nearby. She leaned back in the driver's seat, her slim fingers wrapped around a plastic water bottle, the cool liquid soothing her throat after a 12-hour shift decoding intel at a covert CIA outpost. Her chestnut eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, catching the last streaks of orange fading from the sky. At 34, Lena had mastered the art of stillness, her sharp mind always 3 steps ahead, her body poised like a coiled spring. She wore a fitted grey blazer over a cream blouse, her badge tucked discreetly in an inner pocket, her Glock holstered beneath the seat. This was her ritual, a moment to breathe before the drive home to Decatur, a chance to let the weight of classified secrets slip off her shoulders, if only for a heartbeat. The peace shattered when a police cruiser screeched into the lot, tires spitting gravel, red and blue lights slicing through the dusk. Lena's pulse quickened, but her face stayed, smooth as glass. She set the water bottle in the center console, her movements slow, deliberate, as the cruiser's door flung open. Officer Brett Hargrove stepped out, all 6 feet 3 inches of him, his broad frame filling out the Navy uniform like a wall. His buzzed blonde hair gleamed under the streetlight, and his pale blue eyes narrowed as he strode toward her car, boots crunching with purpose. He rapped his knuckles hard against her window, the sound sharp enough to make a lesser person flinch. Lena didn't. She rolled the glass down halfway, her expression blank, meeting his stare with a coolness that seemed to irritate him instantly. "Step out of the vehicle," Hargrove barked, his voice rough, edged with something dark. He rested one hand on his belt, fingers brushing the black handle of his service pistol, the other gripping a flashlight he didn't need in the fading light. Now. Lena tilted her head slightly, her braided hair brushing her shoulder. "Can I ask why?" Her tone was even, professional, the kind of calm that came from years of facing down threats far deadlier than a suburban cop. Hargrove's lip curled, a sneer twisting his square jaw. "You look suspicious. This ain't your neighborhood. Get out before I make you." His words carried the unmistakable bite of assumption, the kind Lena had heard too many times, the kind that saw her skin before her rights. She exhaled through her nose, a quiet acknowledgement of the game starting, and opened the door. Her polished black flats hit the pavement with a soft tap, and she stood, 5 feet 8 inches of quiet defiance, hands loose at her sides. Hargrove loomed closer, his shadow swallowing the space between them. "Hands where I can see 'em," he snapped, stepping into her personal bubble, close enough she could smell the stale coffee on his breath. She raised her palms slowly, keeping her eyes locked on his, reading the flicker of aggression there. He didn't ask for her license, didn't run her plates, just stared like he was waiting for her to crack. "What's a woman like you doing out here alone?" he pressed, his voice dropping lower, laced with mockery. "You lost? Or up to something you shouldn't be?" Lena's mouth twitched, the faintest hint of a smirk. "I'm parked, drinking water, heading home. That a crime now?" Her words were clipped, precise, daring him to justify this. His eyes hardened, and without warning he grabbed her arm, yanking her toward the sedan's hood. "You're too calm," he growled, shoving her chest first against the warm metal, her blazer wrinkling under his grip. "People hiding something don't talk back like that." Pain flared where his fingers dug into her bicep, but she didn't gasp, didn't give him the satisfaction. Her cheek pressed against the car, and she caught a glint of movement in the distance, headlights approaching fast. Another cruiser pulled in, tires squealing, and 2 more officers hopped out, both white, both smirking like they'd walked into a party. "Got a live one, huh, Brett?" one called, a wiry guy with a patchy beard, his name tag reading, Officer Mills. The other, a stocky man with a shaved head named Officer Pierce, chuckled, cracking his knuckles as he sauntered over. Lena stayed silent, her mind racing, cataloguing their faces, their stances, the bulge of their holsters. She knew this script, had lived it in flashes her whole life, but now it was unfolding with a vicious twist. Hargrove kept her pinned, his weight heavy against her back, while Mills circled to the passenger side. "Let's see what she's got," he muttered, popping the glove box open with a gloved hand. Pierce leaned against the cruiser, watching. With a lazy grin, his arms crossed like this was routine entertainment. Lena's jaw tightened as Mills rummaged, her water bottle rocking slightly in the console from the motion. Then he pulled back, holding up a small plastic baggie filled with white powder, dangling it like a trophy. Well, what do we have here?" he said, voice dripping with fake surprise. "Looks like a felony to me." "That's not mine," Lena said flatly, her voice cutting through their laughter. She twisted her head to glare at Hargrove, his meaty forearm still pressing her down. "You planted it, I saw you." Hargrove's grin widened, a predator's gleam in his eyes. "You saw nothing, sweetheart. You're just a junkie who resisted. Arrest? Ain't that right, boys?" Mills and Pierce nodded, their chuckles growing louder, a chorus of complicity. Mills tossed the baggie onto the hood, inches from Lena's face, the powder glinting under the streetlight. "Gonna be a long night for you," he said, stepping back to grab his radio. "Dispatch, we've got a drug bust, suspect detained." Lena's heart thudded, not from fear, but from the cold clarity sinking in. This wasn't a random stop, wasn't just Hargrove flexing his badge. It was a setup, a calculated move to bury her, and they'd chosen her because of who she was, what she represented in their eyes. Her wrists ached where Hargrove's grip had bruised them, her blouse sticking to her skin with the sweat of restraint, but her mind stayed razor-sharp. She could hear the static crackle of the radio, the dispatcher's voice confirming backup, and the distant hum of traffic on the main road, oblivious to the injustice unfolding here. Pierce sauntered over, pulling cuffs from his belt, the steel, glinting as he spun them on his finger. "Should have stayed out of this part of town," he said, his tone casual, almost bored. "Folks round here don't take kindly to outsiders stirring trouble." He snapped the cuffs open, ready to lock her wrists, while Hargrove finally eased off her back, letting her stand but keeping one hand clamped on her shoulder. The weight of his touch burned, a silent promise of more to come. Lena straightened, rolling her shoulders, her face a mask of control. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice low, steady, carrying a weight they didn't yet grasp. Hargrove snorted, shoving her toward Pierce, who grabbed her arms with a roughness that made her wince. The cuffs hovered, cold and inevitable, but she didn't flinch, didn't beg. She'd been trained for worse, faced killers in shadows deeper. Then this parking lot, and these 3 didn't scare her. They angered her. Mills pocketed the baggie, smirking as he leaned against her car. "Mistake's all yours," he said, tapping the hood. "This ride's impounded now. Evidence, you know." He glanced at Hargrove, a shared look passing between them, a signal Lena caught but couldn't act on yet. The lie was set, the trap sprung, and they thought they had her boxed in, a black woman alone, easy prey for their game. But Lena's smirk grew, faint but unmistakable, a flicker of defiance in her dark eyes. She felt the badge in her pocket, a lifeline they didn't suspect, and the Glock under her seat, out of reach but not forgotten. They'd crossed a line, planted their poison, and crowed about their victory, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath her calm. Her heart pounded, not with panic but with anticipation, because this wasn't the end for her. It was the beginning of their unraveling, and she'd make sure they felt every second of it. As Pierce moved to cuff her, the distant wail of more sirens closed in, backup arriving to seal her fate. The lot buzzed with their laughter, their confidence, their certainty that she'd break under the weight of their fabricated felony. But Lena stood tall, her pulse steady, her mind already plotting the next move. They thought they'd won, thought they'd crushed her with their power. They were wrong, and they'd learn that the hard way. Lena Marshall stood in the flickering glow of the Atlanta parking lot, the air thick with the metallic tang of her sedan's hood, still warm beneath her palms. Officer Brett Hargrove towered over her, his meaty hand clamped on her shoulder, his breath hot with triumph as he sneered, "Time to learn your place." The cuffs dangled from Officer Pierce's grip, glinting like a promise of humiliation, while Officer Mills leaned against her car, twirling the planted baggie of white powder with a smug grin. Sirens wailed closer, backup arriving to cement. Their laughter echoing off the shuttered store's walls. Lena's wrists throbbed where Hargrove had gripped her earlier, her grey blazer smeared with dust from the shove, but her face remained a fortress of calm, her chestnut eyes steady, unyielding. She'd faced warlords in dusty backrooms, stared down death in alleys darker than this, and these three clowns thought they could break her with a frame-up. What a joke. Hargrove tightened his hold, his voice dropping to a growl. "You're done talking back. We've got you, cold junkie. Bet you wish you'd stayed quiet now." His pale blue eyes glinted with malice, the kind that thrived on power over people like her. A black woman alone in a white suburb they'd claimed as their turf. Pierce stepped forward, snapping the cuffs open wider, his shaved head gleaming under the streetlight. "Gonna be a long ride downtown," he said, his tone oily with glee. "Folks like you don't belong out here anyway." Mills chuckled, tossing the baggie onto the hood again, letting it slide toward her like a taunt. The distant rumble of engines grew louder, red and blue lights flashing through the trees, sealing her fate in their twisted script. But Lena didn't flinch. She shifted her weight, her flats scuffing the gravel, and slipped her free hand into her blazer pocket with a smoothness that belied the chaos around her. Her fingers closed around the slim leather wallet, the one she'd carried through missions across 3 continents, the one that held her truth. Hargrove's sneer widened as he leaned in, his breath sour against her ear. "What's that, huh? Gonna bribe me? Too late for that." He yanked her arm, twisting it back, and pain shot through her shoulder, sharp and electric. She bit down the wince, her jaw tight, and pulled the wallet free, flipping it open with a flick of her wrist. "Agent Lena Marshall," she said, her voice low, lethal, cutting through their laughter like a blade. "Central Intelligence Agency." The badge caught the streetlight, its silver emblem gleaming, the bold black letters spelling out a power they couldn't fathom. Time stopped. Hargrove's hand froze mid-twist, his fingers trembling as he stared at the ID, his smug grin dissolving into a slack-jawed gape. The cuffs clattered from Pierce's hands, hitting the pavement with a hollow clang, his stocky frame stumbling back as if she'd struck him. Mills dropped the baggie, the powder spilling across the hood, his wiry frame jerking upright, eyes wide with shock. The air turned thick, heavy with their disbelief, their sudden fear. Lena held Hargrove's gaze, her eyes dark pools of resolve, her voice steady as stone. "How you might want to rethink this." She snapped the wallet shut, slipping it back into her pocket, her movements deliberate, a quiet storm brewing beneath her calm. Hargrove's face drained of color, his sunburned cheeks paling to a sickly white, his mirrored confidence shattered. He fumbled for his radio, his thick fingers slipping on the buttons, static crackling as he barked, "Dispatch, need verification on a federal ID, now." His voice cracked, high and frantic, a far cry from the growl he'd wielded moments ago. Pierce and Mills exchanged glances, their smirks gone, replaced by a twitchy unease, their hands hovering near their belts, like they didn't know what to do next. "You're done," Lena said, stepping away from the hood, brushing dust off, her blazer as if their touch was nothing. "This doesn't end here." Her words hung like a guillotine, a promise wrapped in threat, and Hargrove's eyes blazed, not with panic now, but with a fury born of humiliation. He'd been king of this moment, ruler of her fate, and she'd flipped the board, leaving him scrambling in the dirt. The crowd was thickening now, commuters pulling over, phones lifted high, capturing the scene in grainy footage, their murmurs buzzing like flies. An older man in a trucker hat leaned out his window, shouting, "What's going on?" A teenage girl in a hoodie filmed from the sidewalk, her voice sharp. "They messing with her for no reason." Hargrove spun toward the onlookers, his voice a roar. "Back off, this is police business." But his command faltered, undercut by the tremor in his hands, the sweat beading on his brow. Pierce scooped up the cuffs, muttering curses under his breath, while Mills kicked the spilled powder under the car, his boots scuffing the asphalt in a frantic cover-up. Lena watched it all, her pulse steady, her mind already mapping the fallout. She'd won this round, exposed their game. But Hargroves. Glare told her he wasn't finished. He was a man scorned, a predator licking wounds, and she knew predators didn't slink away quietly. The backup cruisers screeched into the lot, doors flying open, 4 more officers piling out, their boots pounding the ground. A sergeant with a grey buzz cut strode forward, his name tag reading Callahan, his face etched with annoyance. "What's the hold-up, Hargrove?" he snapped, then froze as he saw Lena, badgeless now, but radiating authority. Hargrove stammered, She claims she's CIA, checking it now." Callahan's eyes narrowed, flicking to Lena, then back to Hargrove, suspicion tightening his jaw. The radio crackled, a dispatcher's voice cutting through. "ID confirmed. Agent Lena Marshall, active status, CIA, stand down." Hargrove's shoulders slumped, his radio slipping from his grip, clattering to the pavement. The crowd erupted, gasps and cheers mingling, phones zooming in on his defeat. Callahan barked orders, waving the officers back, his voice sharp with frustration. "Let her go now." Pierce uncuffed her wrists, his hands shaky, avoiding her gaze, while Mills slunk to the cruiser, head ducked. Lena rubbed her wrists, the raw skin stinging, but she stood tall, unbroken, her flats planted firm on the gravel. She walked to her sedan, sliding into the driver's seat with a grace that mocked their chaos. The engine purred to life, a low growl of triumph, and she pulled out of the lot, tires crunching over the scattered powder, leaving them in her dust. Hargrove watched her go, his fists clenched, his face a mask of rage beneath the panic. He'd lost control, been stripped bare. In front of his boys, the crowd, the world, and that burned deeper than any fear. Lena glanced in the rearview mirror, catching his glare, knowing this wasn't over. She'd humiliated him, and men like Hargrove didn't forgive. They festered. They struck back. The road stretched dark ahead, headlights carving through the night, but her mind wasn't on the drive. It was on the fight brewing, the war she'd just ignited. She'd walked away free, her badge a shield, but at what cost? How far would Hargrove go to reclaim his pride? Could justice outrun revenge in a system stacked against her? This wasn't just a stop anymore, it was a spark, and the flames were coming. What do you think happens when a cop's ego gets crushed like that? Comment number 1, if you think Hargrove deserved this wake-up call, hit like if you're rooting for Lena's fight, and subscribe to catch every twist ahead. How long can she dodge the storm he's brewing? Lena Marshall eased her sedan into the gravel driveway of her modest Decatur home, the engine's hum fading into the night stillness. The single-story house sat tucked between overgrown oaks, its beige siding peeling at the edges, a sanctuary. She'd carved out after years of covert ops across continents. The clock on her dash glowed 10 minutes past 11, the Atlanta skyline a faint shimmer in the distance. She stepped out, her gray blazer crumpled from the parking lot scuffle, her wrists still raw where Hargrove's grip had bruised them. Her flats crunched on the path as she climbed the porch steps, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and jasmine from her garden. Inside, she kicked off her shoes, the hardwood cool against her feet, and dropped her keys on a cluttered entry table stacked with unopened mail. The living room was dim, lit only by the soft flicker of a table lamp she'd left on, its amber glow catching the edges of her bookshelves, stuffed with espionage manuals and dog-eared novels. Lena shrugged off her blazer, draping it over a chair, and sank into the worn leather couch, her Glock resting on the cushion beside her. She pulled a slim laptop from her bag, its screen flaring to life as she logged into a secure CIA network. Her fingers danced across the keys, pulling up encrypted files on a trafficking ring she'd been tracking, her mind shifting gears from the day's chaos to the mission ahead. The parking lot's stop gnawed at her, Hargrove's rage replaying in her head, but she pushed it aside. She'd won, exposed him, walked away. That was enough for now. A faint buzz cut through her focus, her security system pinging a motion alert. Lena's eyes snapped to the laptop, a grainy feed from her backyard camera flickering on screen. 3 figures moved in the shadows, clad in black hoodies and ski masks, their gloved hands clutching crowbars and cans of spray paint. Her pulse quickened, but her face stayed stone cold, her training kicking in like a second heartbeat. She grabbed the Glock, chambering around with a soft click, and crept to the kitchen, peering through the blinds. The back door shuddered as a crowbar pried at the lock, wood splintering under the force. Hargrove's cronies, she thought, her jaw tightening. He'd wasted no time. The door burst open, glass shattering across the tile, and the men stormed, in boots pounding, their breaths ragged behind the masks. Lena ducked behind the counter, her Glock steady, watching as they fanned out. The tallest one, broad-shouldered like Hargrove himself, swung his crowbar into her TV, the screen exploding in a shower of sparks. Another, wiry and quick, grabbed her laptop from the couch, stuffing it into a duffel, while the third, stocky and lumbering, yanked books from her shelves, tossing them into a pile. "Find anything she's got?" the tall one snarled, his voice muffled but thick with venom. "Teach this bitch what happens when she talks." Lena's blood boiled, not at the destruction but at the words scrawled in red paint across her walls, as the wiry one shook a can. "Go back where you came from." The slur hit harder than the crowbars, a raw, jagged wound of hate, and she knew this. Wasn't just revenge, it was racial war. She sprang up, Glock raised, and fired a warning shot into the ceiling, plaster raining down. "Drop it," she snapped, her voice ice cold, cutting through their grunts. The tall one spun, crowbar mid-swing, but she charged, slamming her elbow into his throat. He gagged, staggering back, and she kicked his knee, dropping him to the floor with a howl. The wiry one lunged, duffel swinging, but Lena sidestepped, grabbing his arm and twisting until his wrist cracked, the laptop tumbling free. He yelped, clutching his hand, and bolted for the door, leaving the stocky one scrambling to his feet, his crowbar raised. She ducked his wild swing, driving her fist into his gut, then swept his legs, sending him crashing into the bookshelf. Books toppled over him, burying his curses, but the tall one was up again, lunging with a jagged shard of glass from the TV. Lena caught his wrist, slamming it against the wall until he dropped it, blood seeping through his glove. "Tell Hargrove." "He's next," she hissed, shoving him toward the broken door. They fled, stumbling over glass and debris, the tall one clutching his throat, the wiry one limping, the stocky one dragging behind. Lena stood in the wreckage, chest heaving, Glock still warm in her hand. The walls bled red with their hate, her furniture smashed, her laptop gone, its secrets now in their grasp. Sirens wailed in the distance, too late to catch them, their cruiser lights flashing through the oaks as neighbors peeked from curtains. She holstered her gun, stepping over the chaos, her flats crunching on shards, and grabbed her phone from the entry table, dialing her CIA handler, Marcus Tate. "Home. Hit," she said, voice steady despite the storm inside. "Hargrove's crew, they took my laptop." "Stay put," Marcus replied, his gravelly tone tight with urgency. "I'm sending a team, you okay?" She glanced at the slurs, the splintered door, the life they'd tried to erase. "Yeah," she lied, hanging up. The cops arrived, stomping. Through her yard, flashlights sweeping, but she waved them off knowing they'd do nothing. Hargrove's stench was all over this, his pride a festering wound, and he'd turned her sanctuary into a battlefield. She sank onto the porch steps, the night air cool against her sweat-slick skin, thinking she'd dodged the worst. She'd fought them off, held her ground, kept her life. Then her phone pinged, a notification lighting the screen, and her stomach dropped. A video link, streamed live on a local news site, loaded with a shaky thumbnail. Her face, twisted in, rage swinging at Hargrove in the parking lot. She tapped it, the audio crackling to life and her breath caught. The footage was doctored, seamless, showing her lunging at him unprovoked, his voice pleading for her to stop, the planted drugs nowhere in sight. Comments scrolled fast. "Typical thug behavior. Cops can't even do their job anymore. She's dangerous." The view count ticked past 10,000, then 20, her name trending as a villain. A black woman turned aggressor in the public's eye. Lena's fists clenched, nails digging into her palms, the raw skin of her wrists, screaming. Hargrove hadn't just hit her home, he'd hit her soul, weaponizing the world against her. The sirens faded as the cops left, useless as ever, and she stood, staring into the dark, her mind racing. She'd thought she'd won in that lot. Thought. Her badge had burned him, but this was his counterstrike, sharper, deeper. A blade of lies twisting the truth. Her laptop's data could expose her missions, her contacts, her life. But this video was worse, a public execution of her name. She'd fought off 3 men, kept her cool, but Hargrove's war was just beginning, and it was uglier than she'd imagined. The night pressed in, the oaks whispering in the breeze, and Lena's heart thudded with a mix of rage and resolve. She'd survived this round, sent his goons running, but the cost was mounting. Her home was a ruin, her reputation a target, and Hargrove's next move loomed like a shadow she couldn't shake. She stepped back inside, glass crunching underfoot, and locked the broken door with a chair, her Glock close. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot, and she'd be ready when he struck again. He'd underestimated her once, and she'd make him pay for it twice. Lena Marshall slid into a corner booth at a smoky diner 10 miles outside Decatur. The neon sign flickering Mel's all-night eats through grimy windows. The air hung heavy with grease and burnt coffee, the hum of a jukebox spilling old blues into the haze. She wore a black hoodie pulled low, her grey blazer swapped for something less conspicuous after the home invasion left her walls bleeding red with hate. Her wrists, still raw from Hargrove's grip and the fight with his goons, ached as she set her burner phone on the chipped Formica table. Across from her sat Marcus Tate, her CIA handler, his wiry frame hunched over a mug of black coffee, his salt and pepper beard catching the dim light. His brown eyes flicked to her, sharp with concern, but his voice stayed steady. "You look like hell," he said, sliding a folder of printouts her way. "What's the damage?" Lena exhaled, her chestnut eyes scanning the diner, clocking the trucker at the counter, the waitress wiping mugs with a rag. "They hit my place hard," she said, her tone flat, controlled. 3 of Hargrove's boys masked up trashed everything, took my laptop, painted slurs you wouldn't believe. She tapped the phone, pulling up the viral video still burning. Through the internet, her distorted image swinging at Hargrove like some unhinged thug. Then this dropped. Doctored footage turning me into the bad guy. Views are in the millions now. She pushed the phone toward Marcus, her fingers steady, despite the storm inside. He's not just mad, he's out for blood. Marcus leaned back, rubbing his temples, the folder crinkling under his elbow. "That laptop's got classified ops, Lena. If they crack it, we're compromised. You're sure it's Hargrove?" She nodded, her jaw tight. "His stinks all. Over it. That stop wasn't random, neither was this. He's got a network and they're moving fast." Marcus flipped open the folder, revealing grainy photos of Hargrove with shady figures, audio transcripts of backroom deals, a web of corruption she'd been piecing together. "We can trace this," he said, tapping a photo. "Get ahead of it. You've got enough to bury him." Lena's lips twitched, a ghost of a smirk. "Already started. I've got a contact pulling IP logs on that video, tying it back to his crew. I'll burn him down, Marcus." She leaned forward, her voice dropping lower, fierce with resolve. "He thinks he's won framing me like this, but I'm not done." The jukebox switched to a mournful tune, the diner's haze wrapping them. In a cocoon of plotting, and for a moment she felt the tide turning. Hargrove's humiliation in that lot had sparked this war, but she'd end it, badge or no badge. The diner door slammed open, shattering the calm, and Atlanta PD stormed in, boots thudding, guns drawn, their shouts slicing through the blues. "Lena Marshall, hands up!" a voice bellowed, and there he was, Hargrove, striding through the haze, his broad frame filling the doorway, a grin splitting his sunburned face. 6 officers fanned out, barrels trained on her, the trucker diving under his stool, the waitress dropping a mug with a crash. Marcus froze, his hand halfway to his coat, but Lena stayed still, her hoodie shadowing her eyes, her mind racing. This wasn't a bust, it was a lynching. Hargrove sauntered over, his boots crunching glass, his pale blue eyes gleaming with triumph. "Thought you'd slip away, huh?" he said, slamming a forged arrest warrant on the table, the paper smudged with lies. "Assaulting an officer, resisting arrest, caught on tape for the world to see." He leaned in, his breath sour with coffee and spite. "You're done, sweetheart. Badge won't save you now. Lena glanced at the warrant, her pulse steady, spotting the fake timestamp, the bribed witness name scrawled in haste. The video had been his opening shot. This was the kill. "Stand up," he barked, yanking her arm, his grip bruising the same spots he'd marked before. She rose, slow and deliberate, her hoodie slipping back, revealing the fire in her gaze. Marcus stood too, protesting, "She's a federal agent, you can't." But Hargrove cut him off, shoving him back into the booth. "Shut it, old man, or you're next." Two officers grabbed Lena's arms, twisting them behind her, steel cuffs snapping shut with a cold bite, tighter than they needed to be. Her Glock was long gone, left in her trashed home, and her badge felt like a ghost in her pocket, useless against this tide. They dragged her outside, the night air sharp against her skin, the diner's neon buzzing behind her. Hargrove's cruiser idled, lights flashing, a cage waiting to swallow her. He shoved her toward it, his voice dripping venom. "You swung. Hit me, assaulted me, and these boys saw it all." Pierce and Mills flanked him, nodding, their smirks back in place, witnesses bought and paid for. A grainy still from the doctored video flashed on Pierce's phone, her face twisted in rage. A lie so perfect it had fooled the world. The crowd from the lot had spread it, and now this trap snapped shut. "You're a liar," Lena said, her voice low, cutting through his glee. "And a coward." Hargrove's grin faltered just for a second before he slammed her against the cruiser, her cheek scraping the metal. "Keep talking," he growled. "Makes this sweeter." They hauled her into the back, the door banging shut, the cage's bars cold against her shoulders. Marcus pounded the diner window, shouting her name, but the engine roared, drowning him out, and they peeled off, tires screeching into the dark. The precinct loomed ahead, a squat brick fortress glowing under floodlights, and they shoved her through booking, fingerprints smudging ink on her hands. Her mugshot snapped with a flash that burned her eyes. Hargrove hovered, gloating, as they marched her to a holding cell, the steel door clanging shut behind her. The judge was next, a grey-haired relic in a black robe, his face sour as he skimmed the warrant in a dimly lit courtroom an hour later. "No bail," he drawled, banging his gavel, his eyes flicking over her with disdain. "Assault on an officer's serious, especially with your kind." The slur hung unspoken, but she felt it, a whip crack of hate, and Hargrove smirked from the back, arms crossed. The cell was a concrete box, 8 by 8, the bars icy against her palms as she gripped them, the air stale with sweat and despair. A flickering bulb buzzed overhead, casting shadows on the graffiti-scratched walls, names of the forgotten etched in desperation. She sank onto the metal bench, her hoodie damp with diner sweat, her mind racing. Hargrove thought he'd buried her, stripped her badge's power, turned her into a criminal in a system rigged to crush her. But she heard the guards outside, their voices low, laughing about teaching her kind a lesson, their boots pacing the hall. Her fingers traced the bench's edge, finding a loose screw, and she twisted it free, a makeshift tool glinting in her palm. She'd get out, expose him, break this trap. She was plotting, her breath steady, when the TV bolted to the wall flared on. A news ticker screaming, "Rogue CIA agent linked to terror plot." Her face stared back, a grainy mugshot beside Hargrove's doctored video, now tied to a fake. Bomb threat at a mall 20 miles away. The guards chuckled louder, one muttering, "She's done for," and Lena's stomach sank. This wasn't just jail, it was a death sentence. And Hargrove's grin loomed in her mind, wider than ever. What do you do when the law turns predator? Comment number 1. If you think Lena's calm under fire is her strength, hit like if Hargrove's lies make your blood boil, and subscribe to see her fight back. Can she claw out of this cage before the system swallows her whole? Lena Marshall sat on the cold metal bench in her 8 by 8 cell, the flickering bulb overhead casting jagged shadows across the concrete walls. The air reeked of mildew and despair, the graffiti scratches whispering tales of broken lives. Her black hoodie clung to her skin, damp with diner sweat and the precinct's grime, her wrists throbbing from the cuffs that had bitten deeper during Hargrove's arrest. The loose screw she'd pried free glinted in her palm, a tiny shard of hope she rolled between her fingers, her chestnut eyes narrowed with focus. The TV bolted to the wall blared on loop, her mugshot plastered beside lies of a terror plot, the ticker branding her a rogue agent, a monster in the making. Guards paced the hall, their boots echoing, their low chuckles slicing through the buzz. "She's gonna rot," one muttered, his voice thick with glee, and Lena's jaw tightened, her mind racing, plotting. She stood, her flats scuffing the floor, and moved to the vent grate above the bench, its rusted edges flaking under her touch. The screw fit the slots, and she twisted, slow and silent, her breaths measured, her pulse steady, despite the weight of Hargrove's trap. The grate loosened, metal groaning faintly, and she froze as a guard's shadow passed the bars, his flashlight beam sweeping the cell. He grunted, moved on, and she resumed, popping the grate free with a soft clank, catching it before it hit the ground. The duct yawned dark and narrow, a coffin of steel, but it was her way out. She hoisted herself up, her slim frame squeezing through, the screw tucked in her pocket, her arms burning as she pulled the grate back into place behind her. The duct was a maze of filth, cobwebs brushing her face, the air stale with dust and oil, her hoodie snagging on jagged seams. She crawled, elbows scraping, knees aching, the distant hum of the precinct's HVAC system guiding her toward freedom. Sweat stung her eyes, her braided hair catching on bolts, but she pushed forward, her training a lifeline in the dark. Hargrove thought he'd buried her, turned her badge into a joke, her name into a curse, but she'd claw out of this grave he'd dug. The duct sloped down, her body sliding, and she braced herself, landing with a muffled thud in a storage closet, mop handles clattering around her. Lena eased the closet door open, peering into a dimly lit hall, the precinct's underbelly alive with the clatter of keys and radio static. Rain lashed the windows, a storm rolling in, its rumble masking her steps as she slipped out, her hoodie shadowing her face. She darted past a break room, two guards laughing over coffee, their backs to her, and found an exit door, its alarm, wire dangling, cut by neglect or fate. She pushed through, the night swallowing her, rain soaking her instantly, plastering her clothes to her skin. The alley stretched slick and black, puddles reflecting the precinct's floodlights, and she sprinted, her flats slapping wet asphalt, her lungs burning with freedom's bite. Lightning cracked, illuminating the chain-link fence ahead, and she scaled it, her fingers slipping on the wet metal, her body vaulting over into a maze of backstreets. Sirens wailed behind her, faint at first, then sharp, the precinct waking to her absence. She ducked into a shadowy doorway, catching her breath, her mind spinning. Hargrove's frame-up had locked her in, the terror lie sealing her fate. But she'd slipped his noose for now. She pulled the burner phone from her pocket, its screen glowing through the downpour, and dialed Marcus, her voice low, urgent. "I'm out. Need a pickup somewhere safe." "Jesus, Lena," Marcus rasped, static crackling. "Where are you?" She scanned the street, spotting a rusted sign for Peachtree Auto Repair, its lot empty under the storm. Peachtree and 5th, old garage. "Hurry." She hung up, shoving the phone back, and ran, her flat splashing through ankle-deep water. The rain a curtain hiding her from the world. Patrol cars screeched in the distance, their lights slicing through the deluge, and she dove behind a dumpster, her heart pounding, her body pressed to the cold steel. The cruiser passed, tires hissing, and she exhaled, thinking she'd made it, the safe house just a mile away. Then the sky erupted, floodlights blazing from above, a SWAT van roaring around, the corner its black hull gleaming wet. Men in tactical gear poured out, rifles up, their shouts drowned by thunder as they fanned across the street. Lena's stomach dropped, her breath hitching. Hargrove hadn't just locked her up, he'd tipped them off, painted her as armed and dangerous, a threat to hunt. A bullhorn blared, "Lena Marshall, surrender now!" And she bolted, legs pumping, rain blinding her as bullets tore through the air, one grazing her arm, hot pain searing her flesh. Blood mixed with water, staining her sleeve. But she didn't stop, weaving through alleys, her flat slipping on slick cobblestones. The MARTA station loomed ahead, its orange glow a beacon through the storm. Commuters spilling from the last train, umbrellas bobbing in the chaos. Lena tore off her hoodie, tossing it into a trash can, her cream blouse soaked but less distinct, and shoved past the crowd, blending into the throng. A mother tugged a toddler. A businessman cursed at his phone, and she slipped behind them, her braided hair dripping, her arm throbbing where the bullet had kissed it. SWAT boots pounded closer, their radios crackling, but she ducked into a stairwell. Descending to the platform, the rumble of an inbound train vibrating the tiles, she pressed against a pillar, her chest heaving, the crowd's chatter masking her gasps. The train screeched in, doors hissing open, and she slipped aboard, sliding into a seat beside a sleeping teen, his headphones blaring tinny beats. Her arm bled through her sleeve, a slow drip staining the floor, but she pulled her knees up, shrinking into herself, her eyes scanning the car. SWAT stormed the platform, their beams sweeping, their shouts fading as the doors shut, the train lurching forward. She exhaled, her head tipping back, rain dripping from her lashes, the city blurring past the windows. She'd escaped, cheated Hargrove's death squad, her pulse slowing as the adrenaline ebbed. Marcus would meet her. She'd regroup, strike, back, but the noose wasn't gone, it was tightening. Hargrove's voice haunted her, that smug growl from the diner. "You're done," now backed by SWAT, by lies that burned hotter than the graze on her arm. The train rattled, the teen beside her snoring, and she flexed her fingers, the screw still in her pocket, a reminder of her fight. She'd slipped their grip, but they'd hunt her harder now, a terrorist in their script, a black woman they'd never let walk free. The station lights flickered, her reflection ghostly in the glass, and she knew this was just a breath before the next storm. Hargrove's reach was vast, his hate a machine, and she'd have to run faster, fight smarter, to survive it. Lena Marshall slipped through the rusted side door of a derelict warehouse on the outskirts of Atlanta, the storm's last gasps dripping from her soaked blouse, her arm throbbing where the SWAT bullet had grazed it. The cavernous space loomed, dark and hollow, its concrete floor slick with oil stains, broken crates stacked like tombstones under shattered skylights. Rainwater pooled in the corners, reflecting the faint glow of a single bulb swinging from a frayed cord. Her flats squelched with every step, her braided hair dripping, her breath fogging in the chilly air. She'd escaped the precinct, dodged Hargrove's death squad on the Martyr, and now she was here, a ghost in the shadows waiting for Marcus Tate. Her burner phone buzzed in her pocket, his text glowing. Warehouse off Old Mill Road. 5 minutes. She flexed her fingers, the screw from her cell a cold weight against her thigh, her mind sharp despite the exhaustion clawing at her bones. The door creaked again, and Marcus stepped in, his wiry frame hunched against the damp, his salt and pepper, beard glinting under the bulb. He wore a drab green coat, his brown eyes scanning the space before locking on her, a flicker of relief softening his stern face. "You made it," he said, his voice gravelly, stepping closer, a black duffel slung over his shoulder. "Thought they'd nabbed you for sure." Lena nodded, her chestnut eyes steady, her blouse sticking to her skin, blood seeping through the sleeve where the graze had torn it. "Close call," she said, her tone flat, controlled. "SWAT hit hard. Hargroves. Playing dirty, Marcus. Dirtier than we thought." He dropped the duffel at her feet, unzipping it to reveal a stack of files, a burner laptop and a fresh Glock, its matte finish gleaming. "Got what you asked for," he said, tapping the files. Photos of Hargrove with his crew, audio from a sting last month, names of witnesses he's paid off. Enough to sink him and his whole damn network. Lena crouched, flipping through the papers, her fingers smudging ink as she scanned grainy shots of Hargrove laughing with shady figures. In a bar, transcripts of him bragging about planting evidence. Her heart kicked up a notch, a spark of triumph flickering in her chest. "This is it," she said, looking up, her voice firm with resolve. "We take this to the top. CIA brass, FBI, anyone who'll listen. He's done." Marcus nodded, his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed. "Good. I've got a team on standby ready to move when you give the word. You're not alone in this, Lena." She exhaled, a rare breath of relief washing over her, her shoulders easing for the first, say Heim in days. Hargrove had framed her, trashed her home, turned the world against her with lies, but this was her counterstrike. She stood, clutching the files, the weight of justice in her hands, and met Marcus's gaze, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "Thanks," she said, softer now. I knew I could count on you." Then his hand slid from his pocket, not empty, but gripping a snub-nosed revolver, its barrel glinting as he leveled it at her chest. Lena's breath caught, her body tensing, her eyes narrowing as the warehouse's chill sank deeper. "Marcus, what the hell?" she snapped, stepping back, her flat slipping on the wet floor, the files clutched tight. His face hardened, the relief gone, replaced by a cold, calculating stare she'd never seen in 15 years of missions together. "They got to me," he said, his voice low, steady, a confession that cut like glass. "Hargrove's crew offered me 300 grand to hand you over. Said you're too dangerous to keep running." Lena's pulse roared, her mind reeling, but her training held her steady, her voice sharp. "You're selling me out? After everything?" Marcus's jaw twitched, his knuckles whitening on the gun. "It's not personal, Lena. You've pissed off the wrong people. And I've got a family to think about. They'll kill me if I don't." She dropped the files, her hands flexing, her eyes darting to the Glock in the duffel, inches away but a lifetime too far. "You think they'll—" "Stop with me," she said, stepping closer, daring him. "They'll bury you too, Marcus. You're a loose end." He hesitated, his revolver dipping, and she lunged, slamming her shoulder into his chest, her grazed arm screaming as she twisted his wrist. The gun fired, a deafening crack echoing off the walls, the bullet ricocheting into a crate, wood splintering. They grappled, her flat slipping, his boots scuffing, her nails digging into his arm as she wrenched the revolver free, tossing it across the floor. Marcus roared, swinging a fist, but she ducked, driving her knee into his gut, then her elbow into his jaw, a sickening crunch ringing out. He staggered, blood trickling from his lip, and she kicked his legs out, dropping him hard, his head smacking the concrete. He groaned, clutching his face, but before she could catch her breath, he rolled, slamming a fist into a hidden panic button on his belt. A piercing alarm wailed, red lights flashing through the skylights, and Lena's stomach plummeted. "Copy." Sirens screamed closer, engines roaring through the storm's fade. Hargrove's cavalry closing in. She scooped up the Glock, shoving the files into the duffel, her hands shaking with rage, not fear. "You bastard!" she spat, kicking him once more, his groan muffled as she bolted for the side door, her flats pounding the slick floor. Night exploded with lights, cruisers screeching into the lot, their beams cutting through the dark, officers shouting orders as they swarmed the warehouse. Lena burst out, rain stinging her face, and sprinted toward the woods, branches clawing at her blouse, her arm bleeding fresh as she clutched the duffel. Bullets whizzed past, splintering bark, her lungs burning, her legs pumping through mud and leaves. She dove behind an oak, her chest heaving, the Glock warm in her grip, the sirens a relentless howl. Marcus's betrayal gutted her, a knife deeper than Hargrove's lies, stripping her last ally, leaving her alone against a system that wanted her erased. She peeked out, spotting flashlights bobbing closer, their beams slicing the trees, and slipped deeper into the woods, her flat sinking into muck, her breath ragged. The files were her lifeline, proof of Hargrove's rot, but now they were a target on her back, and Marcus's turn meant no one was safe. She'd trusted him, leaned on him, and he'd sold her soul for cash, handing her to the wolves. The cops fanned out, their radios crackling, and she crouched low, vanishing into the dark, her mind a storm of fury and focus. Hargrove's war. It had taken her home, her name, and now her trust. But she'd fight on alone, a ghost they couldn't catch. What happens when the one you trust stabs you in the back? Comment number 1, if you think Marcus got what he deserved. Hit like if Lena's grit has you hooked, and subscribe to see her claw through this mess. Can she outrun a world where even allies wear masks? Lena Marshall crouched behind a rusted gas pump at a rural station 20 miles north of Atlanta, her blouse torn and muddy from the warehouse escape, her grazed arm crusted with dried blood. The storm had faded, leaving a muggy night thick with cricket chirps and the faint glow of a flickering sign reading, "Buck's Fuel Stop." Her flat sank into the damp gravel, her breath shallow, the duffel of evidence slung over her shoulder, its weight a lifeline and a curse. Marcus's betrayal burned in her chest, a raw wound deeper than the bullet's kiss, but she shoved it down, her chestnut eyes scanning the dark for Hargrove's next move. She'd slipped his cops in the woods, but the noose was tightening. her face plastered across every screen as a terrorist, a rogue agent, a black woman they'd never let walk free. She slipped into the station's grimy bathroom, the door creaking, the air sour with bleach and mildew. A cracked mirror reflected her haggard face, her braided hair frayed, her skin smudged with dirt. She pulled a bottle of black dye from the duffel, stolen from a crate in the warehouse, and worked fast, gloved hands staining the sink as she coated her hair, the acrid scent stinging her nose. The transformation was crude but effective, her chestnut locks now a jet black shield, a ghost's disguise. She splashed water on her face, scrubbing the grime, her arm throbbing as she tore a strip from her blouse to wrap the wound, the fabric soaking red instantly. Her flats tapped the tile as she stepped out, the night pressing in, her mind racing. She needed food, a phone, a plan, but Hargrove's reach loomed like a shadow she couldn't shake. Headlights sliced through the dark, a convoy of pickup trucks, roaring into the lot, tires spitting gravel. Their beds packed with men in trucker hats and hunting gear, white faces twisted with fury. Lena froze, ducking behind a stack of tires, her pulse spiking as their shouts filled the air thick with slurs and venom. "There she is," one bellowed, a lanky man with a grey beard, pointing her out, his shotgun raised. "That's the terrorist bitch from the news." Another, a burly guy with a red cap, leapt from the truck, a rope coiled in his hands, its noose swaying like a promise of death. She recognized the type. Hargrove's vigilante dogs, whipped into a frenzy by his lies, her doctored video there. Gospel, her black skin their target. They swarmed, boots pounding, their voices a chorus of hate, live streaming on cracked phones, the feed crackling with comments, "String her up. Justice for the cops." Lena bolted, her flats slipping on the gravel, the duffel bouncing against her hip as she sprinted for a field beyond the station, tall grass whipping her legs. The mob roared after her, headlights blazing, engines revving as they cut her off, forcing her into a clearing ringed by pines, the rope swinging closer. She stumbled, her grazed arms screaming, but she rolled to her feet, facing them, her Glock drawn from the duffel, its weight steady in her hands. "Back off," she snapped, her voice sharp, cutting through their chants, her black-dyed hair plastered to her face with sweat. The lanky one laughed, spitting tobacco juice, his shotgun aimed at her chest. "Ain't no badge saving you now, girl, you're done." He lunged and she fired, the bullet snapping his wrist, his gun clattering as he screamed, clutching that bloody stump. The burly one charged, rope swinging, but she sidestepped, slamming the Glock's butt into his temple, dropping him cold, his cap tumbling into the dirt. The crowd faltered, phones shaking, but a third man, wiry and wild-eyed, tackled her, his weight crushing her into the grass, his fists pounding her ribs. Lena gasped, pain exploding, but she twisted, jamming her knee into his groin, then her elbow into his nose, blood spraying as he howled. She scrambled up, snatching a truck key from his pocket, and sprinted for the nearest rig, a beat-up Ford with mud-caked tires. The mob surged, shotguns blasting, pellets tearing through the air, one slicing her calf, hot agony rippling up her leg. She dove into the cab, slamming the door, the key shaking in her hand as she jammed it into the ignition. The engine roared, headlights flaring, and she floored it, tires screeching as she plowed through the field, the mob's screams fading, their buckshot pinging off the tailgate. She gripped the wheel, her breath ragged, the truck bouncing over ruts, pine branches slapping the windshield. Blood seeped from her calf, pooling on the floorboard, her arm pulsing with every turn. But she'd broken free, the gas station shrinking. In the rear view, the live stream cutting out as they scrambled in her dust. She'd fought off a lynch mob, turned their rope into a relic, thought she'd outrun Hargrove's hate for one more night. The road stretched dark ahead, her headlights carving a path, and she exhaled, her chest tight with relief, her mind spinning. She'd survived, kept the files, stayed alive. Then the truck's radio crackled, static giving way to Hargrove's voice, smug and venomous, cutting through the night. "This is Officer Brett Hargrove, Atlanta PD. Suspect Lena Marshall just killed 2 civilians in a violent escape. Nationwide manhunt in effect." Her stomach dropped, her knuckles whitening on the wheel. She hadn't killed anyone, hadn't even fired to kill, but there it was. His lie broadcast live, pinning 2 deaths on her, bodies she'd left breathing, now dead in his script. The radio droned on. her mugshot flashing on every channel, the terror label cemented, the mob's blood now her burden. Lena's jaw clenched, her flats pressing the gas harder, the truck rattling as she sped into the dark, the files beside her a ticking bomb. Hargrove hadn't just sent his dogs, he'd framed her for murder, twisted her fight into a massacre, his voice a noose tightening around her neck. The road blurred, her calf bleeding steady, her arm a dull roar of pain. But her mind burned, clear rage fueling her. She'd escaped their lynching, stolen their truck, thought she'd won a breath, but Hargrove's counterstrike was ruthless, a lie bigger than the video, deadlier than the rope. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint, but growing, the manhunt spreading like wildfire, and she knew this was just the edge of his storm. Lena Marshall hunched over a wobbly desk in a dingy motel room off a forgotten highway, 30 miles from the gas station where Hargrove's mob had tried to lynch her. The room stank of stale cigarettes and mold, the floral wallpaper peeling. At the seams, a buzzing neon vacancy sign casting pink streaks through the blinds. Her stolen truck sat hidden behind a dumpster outside, its mud-caked tires a silent witness to her escape. Her black-dyed hair hung damp around her face, her blouse shredded and blood-stained, her grazed arm wrapped in a makeshift bandage, her calf throbbing where buckshot had torn the flesh. The duffel of evidence lay open beside her, Marcus's files, spilling across the desk, photos and transcripts glinting under a flickering lamp. Her Glock rested within reach, its cold steel a comfort, while the motel's ancient laptop hummed, its screen glowing with a cracked login she'd hacked into with a stolen Wi-Fi signal. She flexed her bruised fingers, her chestnut eyes sharp despite the pain pulsing through her body, and flipped through the files, her mind a storm of focus and fury. Hargrove's bank records stared back, offshore accounts bloated with dirty cash, tied to a racist cartel she'd tracked for months. She smirked, a thin sliver of triumph cutting through the exhaustion, as she traced his payments to crooked cops, judges, even the governor's aides, a web of corruption so vast it'd choke him when she unleashed it. Her burner phone buzzed, a text from a journalist contact, Maya Reed, glowing on screen. "Send me what you've got, I'll break it wide open." Lena's heart kicked up, her flats tapping the threadbare carpet. This was her move, her chance to flip Hargrove's lies, to bury him under the truth. She scanned the documents into the laptop, her hands trembling but precise, each page a dagger aimed at his heart. Photos of him laughing with cartel enforcers in a smoky bar, audio of him bragging about planting drugs, witness names he'd bribed to frame her, all uploaded to a secure cloud link she fired off to Maya. The upload bar ticked slow, the motel's Wi-Fi stuttering, and she leaned back, her breath easing, imagining the headlines. "Officer exposed in racist corruption scandal." Hargrove's voice echoed in her head, smug on that radio, pinning 2 fake murders on her, but this would silence him, turn his manhunt into his downfall. The upload hit 100%, and she grinned, fierce and fleeting, thinking she'd won, that justice might finally bite back. The TV bolted to the wall flared on, a news alert cutting through the room's hum, and Lena's grin vanished. Maya Reed's face filled the screen, pale and shaken, standing outside a smoldering wreck of an office building, flames licking the night sky. "Breaking news," she stammered, her voice cracking. "My newsroom was bombed 20 minutes ago. 3 dead, including my editor. Sources say it's tied to a leak I was working on." Lena's stomach plummeted, her flats freezing on the carpet, her eyes locked on the screen as Maya clutched a singed notepad, her words a gut punch. The suspect, Lena Marshall, already wanted for murder, now linked to this attack. The broadcast cut to Lena's mugshot, then a crime scene photo, her fingerprints glowing on a bomb fragment, a forgery so perfect it'd fool the world. Her chest tightened, rage and dread colliding, her hands slamming the desk, the lamp wobbling. Hargrove hadn't just struck back, he'd unleashed hell, turning her evidence into a death trap. The cartel had moved fast, bombing Maya's office, killing her team and planting her prints, a counterstrike that shredded her victory in seconds. Sirens wailed outside, close and sharp, tires screeching into the motel lot, and Lena's pulse roared, her mind snapping to survival. She grabbed the Glock and duffel, shoving the laptop under her arm and bolted for the window, her calf screaming as she kicked it open, glass shattering onto the pavement below. Red and blue lights flooded the room, cops shouting orders. There, boots pounding the stairs, but she leapt, landing hard on the dumpster's lid, pain exploding up her leg. She rolled off, clutching the duffel, and sprinted for the truck, her flats slipping on wet asphalt, her breath ragged as bullets tore through the air, one splintering the dumpster's edge inches from her head. She dove into the cab, the key jamming into the ignition, the engine coughing to life as cops swarmed, their beams blinding her. She floored it, tires spinning, the truck lurching forward, smashing through a wooden fence as she peeled onto the highway, her heart pounding, her arm bleeding fresh through the bandage. The motel shrank in the rear view, sirens chasing her, but she'd slipped them again, her mind reeling from the cartel's savagery, Hargrove's reach now a monster she couldn't outrun. The laptop beeped, a pop-up flashing mid-flight, and she glanced at it, her stomach twisting. Drones buzzed overhead, their red eyes blinking through the night, thermal scopes tracking her heat signature, a tech escalation Hargrove had pulled from his cartel allies. She swerved, the truck rattling, branches scraping the roof as she veered into a wooded side road. The drones humming closer, their whir a death knell. The files were gone, burned in Maya's office, her evidence ash, and now she was a mass murderer. In the public's eye, her fight flipped into a nightmare. She'd leaked the truth, thought she'd crushed him, but Hargrove's revenge was a tidal wave, drowning her in blood and lies. The road narrowed, gravel crunching under the tires, and she gripped the wheel, her flats pressing the gas, her mind racing for an out. Hargrove had turned her win into a massacre, his cartel backing a beast she hadn't seen coming, and the drones overhead meant no hiding, no rest. Her calf oozed, her arm pulsed, but her eyes burned with defiance, the screw from her cell still. In her pocket, a shard of her will. She'd survived the mob, outrun SWAT, fought Marcus's betrayal, and now this, a trap that'd kill her if she slowed down. The woods loomed dark, the drones relentless, and she knew Hargrove's next blow was waiting, sharper than ever. What do you do when truth becomes a weapon against you? Comment number 1. If you think Lena's evidence deserved to see daylight, hit like if Hargrove's cartel twist has you raging, and subscribe to catch her next move. How far will his revenge stretch when she's got nothing left to lose? Lena Marshall hunched over the wheel of the stolen truck, weaving through dense woods 30 miles from the motel, the drone's red eyes fading as she outran their thermal scopes. Pine needles scraped the windshield, the engine rattling. Her black-dyed hair plastered to her sweat-streaked face. Her grazed arm burned under its soggy bandage, her calf oozed blood onto the floorboard, and the duffel of evidence jostled beside her, a lifeline shredded by the cartel's bombing of Maya's office. The highway loomed ahead, its asphalt glistening under a crescent moon, and she floored it, tires humming, her chestnut eyes darting to the rear view for flashing lights. Hargrove's lies had branded her a mass murderer, a terrorist, a black woman hunted by a nation, but she'd survived his mob, his drones, his betrayal. She needed a lifeline, someone untouched by his rot. She pulled into a truck stop, its neon diesel Haven sign buzzing, and parked behind a row of 18-wheelers, their engines idling like sleeping giants. Her flats crunched on gravel as she limped to a payphone bolted to a concrete pole, its receiver scratched and sticky with gum. She fed it quarters from the duffel, her fingers trembling, and dialed her sister Tara's number, the only family she had left, a lifeline in Stone Mountain, 40 miles east. The line rang, each tone a prayer, and Tara's voice crackled through, warm but edged with sleep. "Lena, it's 2 in the morning, you okay?" Her toddler son Jaden cooed in the background, a soft anchor in the storm. "No," Lena said, her voice low, urgent, cutting through the night's hum. "Tara, listen. They're after me, cops, worse. You and Jaden need to get out now. Head to Aunt Claire's in Savannah. Don't stop for anything." Tara's breath hitched, confusion sharpening her tone. "What? Lena, what's happening?" Before Lena could answer, a scream tore through the line, Tara's voice pitching into panic. "Someone's here." Glass shattered, Jaden wailed, and men's shouts drowned the call, rough with menace. "Lena, there..." The line cut to static, a void swallowing her words, and Lena's heart stopped, her flats grinding into the gravel, her chest caving. With dread, she dropped the receiver, sprinting back to the truck, her calf screaming, her arm a dull roar and peeled out, tires spitting dust as she raced toward Stone Mountain. The highway blurred, her mind a whirlwind of fear and fury, Hargrove's shadow stretching over her family, his vengeance sinking claws into her blood. She pushed the truck to 90, the engine groaning, her knuckles white on the wheel, the 40-mile stretch a torture of what-ifs. Tara's scream echoed, Jaden's cry a knife in her gut, and she knew this was no random hit. Hargrove had tracked her call, turned her plea into a trap, his cartel allies striking where it had hurt most. She screeched into Tara's neighborhood, a quiet grid of bungalows, their lawns tidy under streetlights, and slammed the brakes outside. Tara's yellow house, its front door ajar, a window smashed. The truck's headlights caught glints of glass on the porch, and Lena leapt out, Glock drawn, her flats pounding the steps, her breath ragged. Inside, the living room was a war zone, furniture overturned, toys scattered, a lamp flickering on the floor. She moved silent, a predator in her own pain, her gun steady as she swept the hall, her ears straining for sound. A muffled sob broke. The stillness, Tara's voice, and Lena bolted to the back, kicking open a storage room door. Tara knelt on the concrete floor, her wrists bound with zip ties, her brown eyes wide with terror, blood trickling from a split lip. Jaden clung to her, his tiny hands clutching her shirt, his sobs shaking his 3-year-old frame. Two men loomed over them, cartel enforcers in black tactical gear, one wiry with a scarred cheek, the other hulking with a shaved head, both armed, with silenced pistols. The wiry one spun, his gun rising, but Lena fired first, a double tap to his chest, his body crumpling before he could blink. The hulking one lunged, his pistol spitting a muted shot, the bullet grazing her shoulder, hot pain flaring as she ducked, slamming her Glock into his knee. He buckled, roaring, and she finished him with a shot to the head, blood pooling on the concrete, her ears ringing. "Lena!" Tara gasped, scrambling to her feet as Lena cut the zip ties with a shard of glass, her hands shaking, her voice tight. "We're leaving now." She scooped Jaden up, his tears soaking her blouse, and grabbed Tara's arm, pulling them toward the truck, her flat slipping in the enforcer's blood. They piled in, Tara buckling Jaden into the back, her breaths ragged, her voice trembling. "They said you'd come, said it was a message." Lena's jaw clenched, her flats slamming the gas, the truck lurching onto the road, her mind screaming Hargrove's name. She'd saved them, fought through hell, thought she'd won this round, her family safe in her grip. She sped toward a safe house Marcus had once mapped, a cabin 50 miles north, her headlights carving the dark, Tara's sobs softening beside her. "You're okay," Lena said, her voice firm, a lie to steady them both, her grazed shoulder seeping blood, her calf a pulsing ache. The windshield wipers thumped, the road empty, and she exhaled, her chest loosening, thinking they'd made it, that Hargrove's claw had missed this time. Then a sharp crack split the night, a sniper's bullet shattering the windshield, glass exploding inward, and Tara's head snapped back, a red bloom erupting from her temple, her body slumping lifeless against the seat. Lena screamed, raw and guttural, swerving the truck, Jaden's wails piercing the chaos as she floored it, her vision blurring with tears and rage. The radio crackled, Hargrove's voice oozing through, smug and cold. "You don't get to win, Marshall. Told you that." The hacked GPS blinked, his tech tracing her every move. His cartel sniper perched somewhere in the dark, a shadow she couldn't fight. Tara's blood soaked her lap, Jaden's cries a dagger in her soul, and Lena gripped the wheel, her flats. Pressing the gas, the truck roaring into the night, her mind shattered but burning. She'd saved them, held them close, thought she'd cheated his hate, but Hargrove had ripped her apart, his revenge a bullet through her heart. Lena Marshall barreled down a back road 50 miles north of Stone Mountain, the stolen truck's engine screaming, Tara's blood soaking her lap, Jaden's wails shredding the silence. Her sister's lifeless body slumped against the passenger door, her head lolling, a crimson hole where the sniper's bullet had stolen her forever. The shattered windshield let the night air howl in, whipping Lena's black-dyed hair, her grazed arm and shot calf pulsing with pain, her blouse a tattered shroud of grief and rage. Jayden sobbed in the back, his tiny hands reaching for his mother, and Lena's chest burned, her chestnut eyes wet but unblinking, her flats jamming the gas as the truck rattled toward a safe house she'd never reach. Hargrove's voice lingered. From the hacked GPS, his smug taunt of venom in her veins, and she gripped the wheel, her knuckles white, vowing to bury him, even if it took her last breath. She veered off the road, tires crunching into a wooded lot, and slammed the brakes, the truck lurching to a stop under a canopy of pines. Her hands shook as she unbuckled Jayden, pulling him into her arms. His tears soaking her neck, his cries a dagger in her soul. She climbed out, Tara's body heavy beside her, and sank to the dirt, cradling her nephew, her sister's blood staining her flats. The duffel of evidence lay forgotten in the cab, its files useless against this loss, but her Glock stayed close, a cold promise in her hand. She rocked Jayden, whispering, "I've got you," her voice cracking, her mind a furnace of vengeance. Hargrove had taken everything, home, name, sister, and she'd make him pay, not with files but with fire. Headlights pierced the dark, a black SUV rolling up, and Lena tensed, Glock raised, until a familiar face emerged. Agent Carla Diaz, a CIA contact from a past op, her short black hair glinting under the moon. "Lena," Carla said, voice tight, stepping closer, her eyes flicking to Tara's body, then Jayden's trembling form. "Marcus tipped us off before he turned. I've got a safe spot 10 miles out. Come with me." Lena lowered the gun, her flats sinking into the mud, and nodded, her throat too raw to speak. Carla helped her load Tara's body into the SUV, Jayden clinging to Lena's chest, and they drove, the truck abandoned, its blood-stained seats a tomb of her failure. The safe house was a cabin tucked in a hollow, its log walls weathered, a generator humming in the back. Carla settled Jayden on a cot, his sobs fading to whimpers as he clutched a blanket, while Lena paced, her flats leaving muddy streaks, her mind churning. "Hargrove's tied to the governor," she said, voice low, lethal, pulling the duffel's remnants from the SUV. "Files prove it, bank records, bribes, cartel deals. I'm hitting him where it hurts." Carla nodded, unpacking a laptop, her fingers flying as she patched Lena into a secure line. "We've got eyes on his precinct," she said. "He's there, gloating. Let's move." Lena planted bugs from Carla's kit, tiny mic she'd slip into Hargrove's lair, and hacked the precinct's security cams with the laptop, her bruised fingers steady on the keys. She drove the SUV to Atlanta's edge, parking blocks from the brick fortress, its floodlights glaring, cops milling like ants. Her calf throbbed, her arm bled through the bandage, but she slipped through shadows, flats silent on wet pavement, her blouse a ghost in the dark. She scaled a dumpster, prying a vent with the cell screw, its edges sharp in her palm, and crawled inside, the duct steel biting her knees, her breath fogging as she planted the first bug near Hargrove's office, his voice drifting through, smug and thick. "She's a dead woman walking," he laughed, and her blood boiled, her flat scuffing as she dropped another mic. She stole files from a locker room, sweaty uniforms masking her scent, papers linking Hargrove to Governor Ellis, a racist puppet master, who'd greenlit the cartel's reign. Payments for silence, orders to crush dissent, all in black ink she stuffed into her blouse, her heart pounding with grim triumph. She slipped out through a loading bay, dodging a patrol, and raced back. To the SUV, her flats pounding, her mind ablaze, Carla relayed the bug's feed, Hargrove's boasts crackling live, and Lena uploaded it all, files, audio, video, to a dark web drop, then blasted it to newsrooms, blogs, activists, her fingers shaking as the world lit up with his filth. Protests erupted outside the precinct, chants of justice shaking the night, cops defecting as the governor's name burned online. Hargrove's arrest hit fast, cameras swarming as he was cuffed, his sunburned face pale, his smugness gone, dragged from his office by feds who'd turned on him. Lena watched from a rooftop blocks away, Carla's binoculars pressed to her eyes, Jayden asleep in the SUV below, her flats dangling over the edge, her chest heaving. She'd done it, exposed him, toppled his empire, turned his lies to ash. The crowd roared, fists raised, and she exhaled, thinking she'd won, that Tara's blood had bought this reckoning, her sister's ghost avenged in the chaos below. Sirens wailed, feds storming the governor's mansion next, the system cracking under her blow. Then a black van screeched up, its doors bursting open. Cartel hitmen in ski masks spilling out, their rifles glinting as they charged her perch. Lena's stomach dropped, her Glock snapping up, but a needle jabbed her neck, cold fire spreading fast, her vision blurring as she stumbled, the binoculars clattering. Hands grabbed her, rough and relentless, dragging her into the van, her flats scraping the roof, her body limp as the door slammed shut. Hargrove's last laugh echoed in her mind, his voice from the bugs. They'll never let her win, and she realized he'd sold her out before the cuffs clicked, his cartel leash tighter than she'd known. The van roared off, Jaden's, cries fading, Carla's shouts lost, and darkness swallowed her. Her triumph flipped into a trap, her fight far from over. Lena Marshall jolted awake, her body strapped to a rusted chair in a cartel basement, the air thick with damp rot and the metallic tang of blood. Concrete walls loomed, stained with grime, water dripping from a cracked ceiling into puddles that mirrored her black-dyed hair, matted and wild. Her wrists and ankles burned under leather restraints, her blouse shredded, exposing her grazed arm and shot calf, both crusted with scabs, now oozing fresh from the van's rough grab. The needle's chill lingered in her neck, a dull ache spreading, her head pounding as she blinked against the glare of a single bulb swaying overhead. Her flats were gone, bare feet cold on the slick floor, the cell screw still tucked in her pocket, a hidden spark of defiance. Hargrove's arrest flashed in her mind, his empire crumbling under her leaks, but this was his final claw, his cartel allies snatching her from triumph's edge. Footsteps echoed, heavy and deliberate, and 3 masked men emerged from the shadows, their black hoods swallowing their faces, eyes glinting through slits. The tallest one, lean and sinewy, clutched a knife, its blade jagged and stained, while the others, broad and hulking, carried pliers and a coiled whip, their silence a menace thicker than shouts. They circled her, boots splashing puddles, and the tall one knelt, his knife tracing her arm, not cutting yet, just teasing. "How you've been busy," he rasped, voice muffled but sharp. "Tearing down our boy Hargrove. Boss wants your secrets, CIA bitch. Every name, every code." Lena's jaw clenched, her chestnut eyes blazing, her breath steady despite the fear, clawing her gut. She'd lost Tara. Jaden was alone, and now this, a torture pit to break her. The knife bit, sudden and deep, carving a racial slur into her forearm, the letters jagged and cruel, blood welling fast as pain seared her nerves. She bit her lip, stifling a scream, her body tensing against the straps, her mind racing. "Talk!" the tall one snarled, pressing the blade harder, slicing deeper, and she spat in his mask, the glob landing wet on his cheek. He recoiled, cursing, and the broad one swung the whip, its crack splitting the air, the leather lashing. Her back, tearing through her blouse, a red welt blooming instantly. She gasped, tears stinging her eyes, but her voice stayed ice. "You'll get nothing," she hissed, her bare feet curling against the floor, her will a steel wall. The hulking one grabbed her hand, pliers cold on her fingernail, and yanked, the nail ripping free with a wet snap, blood dripping onto the concrete. Pain exploded, white-hot, her vision blurring, but she laughed, raw and defiant, her head tilting back. "That all you've got?" she taunted, her voice a blade of its own, cutting through their grunts. The tall one growled, slashing her thigh, blood soaking her pants, and the whip cracked again, striping her shoulder, her skin screaming under the assault. They demanded names, ops, her CIA network. Each refusal met with a new cut, a new lash, her body a canvas of their hate, racial venom dripping from every blow. Lena's mind spun, her training a lifeline, and she flexed her wrist, feeling the screw's edge against her pocket, a plan flickering through the haze. She slumped, feigning defeat, her head lolling, her breaths ragged, and the tall one smirked, lowering his knife, thinking her broken. "Good girl," he muttered, stepping closer, and she struck, wrenching her hand free, the strap fraying under, the screws bite, her fingers snatching the blade from his grip. She slashed his throat, a gurgled scream bubbling as he fell. Blood pooling fast, his mask slipping to reveal a scarred face she'd never forget. The broad one charged, whip raised, but she rolled from the chair, her calf buckling, and drove. The knife into his gut, twisting hard, his grunt choking as he dropped, the whip clattering. The hulking one lunged, pliers swinging, and she ducked, her bare feet slipping in blood, ramming the blade into his chest, his weight crashing over her as he fell, pinning her briefly under his bulk. She shoved him off, gasping, her body screaming. Blood slick on her hands, her heart pounding with feral triumph. She staggered up, cutting the ankle straps, the chair creaking as she kicked it aside, the basement a slaughterhouse of her making, her enemies dead at her feet. She limped to a rusted ladder, her bare feet slipping on wet rungs, her arm and leg bleeding steady, and climbed, shoving a trapdoor open into a stormy night, rain lashing her face, washing the blood from her skin. She stumbled into a forest, pines towering, her blouse a tattered flag, thinking she'd cheated death, her breath ragged with relief. Then helicopters roared overhead, blades slicing the sky, their spotlights blinding her, thermal scopes locking on her heat. She froze, her stomach dropping. The forest alive with shouts, a militia of ex-cops in tactical gear swarming from the trees, rifles up, Hargrove's voice booming through a megaphone. "You're mine, Marshal!" Lena's heart sank, her bare feet sinking into mud, her eyes darting as they closed in, guns cocked, his sunburned face grinning from a chopper's open door, free from jail, his cartel pull deeper than her leaks. She'd fought off torture, killed her captors, thought she'd won a breath, but Hargrove had upgraded his game, a militia at his command, tracking her through the wild. Bullets tore through branches, one grazing her ear, hot blood trickling down her neck as she dove into the river, its icy current swallowing her, her body screaming as she swam, the militia's beams chasing her wake. She surfaced downstream, gasping, her strength fading, Hargrove's roar echoing, her survival a fragile thread in his storm. Lena Marshall dragged herself from the river's icy grip, her bare feet sinking into the muddy bank, the current's roar fading as she collapsed under a willow's drooping branches. Rain pelted her shredded blouse, washing blood from her carved arm and lashed back, her black-dyed hair plastered to her shivering frame. Her calf oozed where buckshot had torn it, her ear bled from the militia's graze, and her body trembled, battered from the cartel's torture, but her chestnut eyes burned with a fire unquenched. Hargrove's helicopters thrummed in the distance, their light slicing the storm, his militia scouring the forest, his voice a ghost in her skull, vowing she'd never win. She clutched the screw from her cell, its edges digging into her palm, and rose, her breath ragged, her mind forging a plan from the ashes of her pain. She stumbled through the woods, thorns snagging her pants, her bare feet numb on wet earth, scavenging as she went, a predator reborn. A rusted gas can glinted under a pine, half full, its fumes sharp in her nose, and she snatched it, her arm screaming as she hoisted it. A discarded lighter flickered in a ditch, its flame weak but alive, and she pocketed it, her fingers trembling. With purpose. She found copper wire coiled in a hunter's trap, its strands thin but strong, and gathered it, her mind piecing together a bomb, a last stand to burn Hargrove's world down. The abandoned mill loomed ahead, its sagging roof a skeleton against the sky, its brick walls crumbling, a perfect trap for her prey. Lena limped inside, the mill's air thick with dust and rot, old machinery rusting in shadows, rain drumming through broken beams. She worked fast, her bare feet slipping on slick planks, pouring gas into a cracked barrel, wiring it with the copper, the lighter taped to spark it all. Her hands shook, blood dripping from her arm, her calf a dull roar, but she rigged the trap, a crude explosive born of desperation, its fumes choking the space. She smeared mud on her face, a warrior's mask, and climbed a rickety catwalk, her Glock scavenged from the cartel basement steady in her grip, her eyes scanning the dark. Hargrove's militia was coming, their choppers buzzing closer, and she'd lure them here, end this war on her terms. Headlights flared outside, engines growling as trucks rolled in, ex-cops in tactical gear spilling out, rifles up. Hargrove's sunburned face grinning from the lead vehicle, free and feral, his cartel pull a chain she couldn't break. "She's here," he bellowed, megaphone crackling, his voice thick with triumph as they swarmed the mill, boots pounding, beams sweeping. Lena crouched, her breath shallow, and fired a shot into the air, the crack echoing, drawing them in, her bait set. They stormed the floor, shadows weaving through rusted hulks, and she lit the fuse, the lighter's flame kissing the wire, a hiss rising as gas fumes caught, her heart pounding with grim resolve. The explosion ripped through the mill, a fireball swallowing the barrel, flames surging outward, engulfing half the militia in a roaring inferno. Men screamed, flesh charring, gear melting as the blast tossed bodies like ragdolls, the catwalk shuddering under Lena's feet. Hargrove's truck flipped, glass shattering, his howl piercing the chaos as fire licked his legs, pinning him in. The wreckage. She leapt from the catwalk, landing hard on a pile of debris, her calf buckling, her bare feet scorched but moving, limping toward him, Glock raised, her eyes locked on his writhing form. "You're done," she rasped, her voice raw, her finger tightening on the trigger, Tara's blood a ghost in her veins. He laughed, choking on smoke, his pale blue eyes wild, defiant even in ruin. "You'll never win," he spat, blood flecking. His lips, his body trapped, the flames creeping closer. "They'll hunt you forever," she fired, the bullet punching through his chest, his head slumping, his grin fading to a lifeless sneer, the mill a pyre of his end. She staggered back, her breath heaving, the fire's heat searing her skin, her ears ringing with victory's cost. The remaining militia scattered, their shouts lost in the blaze, and she limped out, mud caking her feet, the storm washing her clean, thinking she'd won, that Hargrove's death closed this hell. She trekked to a ridge, her body screaming, and sank against a boulder, the mill's glow fading behind her, her Glock slipping from her hand. News choppers buzzed in the distance, their feeds already screaming lies. Terrorist Lena Marshall, bombs ex-cop militia, her face a scourge, her fight twisted into madness. She'd killed him, ended his reign, avenged Tara, saved Jaden from his shadow. But the world saw a monster, Hargrove's final lie outliving him. She exhaled, her chest hollow, her bare feet bleeding into the dirt, ready to vanish, to regroup, to fight the system that birthed him, a ghost forged in this war. Then the sky flared, a CIA drone streaking low, its missile locking on her heat, a whine cutting the night as it fired. The safe house she'd never reached, the cabin where Carla hid Jaden, erupted in a distant fireball, the blast's echo shaking the ridge, her nephew's cries silenced forever. Lena's scream tore free, primal and broken, her body lurching forward, her eyes wide with horror as the drone circled back, its red eye blinking, her own agency deeming her a liability, a threat to erase. She dove into the brush, the missile missing her by inches, dirt exploding around her, her lungs burning as she crawled, her mind shattered, Jaden's loss a wound deeper than Tara's. She vanished into the forest, her bare feet pounding, her blouse a tattered flag, the drone's hum fading as she slipped its scope, alive but gutted, a fugitive from her own. Hargrove was dead, his militia ash, but the CIA's betrayal flipped justice into ash, her fight for truth a pyre that cost her everything. She sank against a tree, rain masking her sobs, her chestnut eyes hollow, the screw clutched in her fist, a vow forming in her blood. They'd made her a ghost, a legend, and she'd return not to win but to dismantle, to burn the system that birthed Hargrove, that killed her kin, that hunted her now, a war without end. Lena Marshall's journey in Cop tries to intimidate black woman. Seconds later, she exposes her CIA agent status and he panics, offers profound lessons about resilience, betrayal, and the corrosive power of systemic injustice. First, it reveals the unyielding strength required to face racial hatred head-on. Lena's every step, from exposing Hargrove's corruption to surviving torture, showcases a spirit that refuses to break, teaching us that courage can thrive even in the darkest corners. Second, the story unmasks the fragility of trust. Marcus's turn and the CIA's final strike prove that allies can become enemies when power shifts, urging us to question who truly stands with us. Third, it exposes how deeply racism poisons institutions, from Hargrove's badge to the governor's office, a stark reminder that justice is often a facade masking prejudice. Lena's fight, though victorious over Hargrove, ends in loss, highlighting a bitter truth. Individual wins can't always dismantle a rigged system. Finally, her transformation into a hunted ghost underscores the cost of defiance. Sometimes, survival demands becoming the shadow you're forced to flee. This tale isn't just a thriller, it's a mirror to our world's cracks, pushing us to confront the ugly realities beneath the surface. What does Lena's story teach you about standing up when everything falls apart? Comment below if her grit inspires you. Hit like if this racist story stirs your soul, and subscribe for more tales of unyielding justice. Share this to spark a conversation about truth's price, and thank you for joining this journey. May you find strength to face your own battles,